Soul Calibur.
Hey guys, how's it going? So today I'm going to be reviewing a legendary game for the Sega Dreamcast, which is Soul Calibur. Oh yes, what a fantastic game for the Dreamcast, and I'm so excited to do this review for you guys. Now I got two reasons why I wanted to review this game, and that is, the first one is that Soul Calibur VI is coming out, and I thought what better way to basically kill time than to review one of the earliest entries in this amazing series of games. And the other reason is because in my last video that I've made on this YouTube channel, if you haven't seen it, basically I did a 19th birthday celebration of the Sega Dreamcast, and what I said in that video is that I am basically going to do a review of all the launch titles for the Sega Dreamcast, meaning all the ones that came out on September 9th, 1999. So Soul Calibur is one of those launch titles, and I thought what better way to start off all those reviews than with this game. So let's get started. So I'm going to do this review differently than the first ever game review I've ever done on this channel, which was my review of Wind and Water Puzzle Battles for the Dreamcast. The way I'm going to do it different is that I'm going to try to be much more objective and, much more critical in these reviews from now on. And the way that I'm planning to do that is that I've actually came up with my own grading scale. So I'm going to basically grade these games into 5 different categories. They are story, gameplay, graphics, art and presentation, and music and sound design. In each one of these categories, you can score a maximum of 20 points. If you manage to score 20 on all 5 of these categories, you'll get automatically 100. The opposite is true. If you get a 0 on all of them, you get a 0. And the way that I'm going to do this is that I'm going to award these games 4 different types of seals that you can get. So the best one that you can get is the Sega Dreamcast Golden Seal of Approval. The second one is the Silver Seal of Approval. Then the Bronze. Then the Sega Dreamcast Seal of Disapproval, which is obviously the one we do not want to get. So the way that these games are going to be awarded these seals is that, if you score 100 to 89 in the rubric category, then you would get a golden seal of approval. Then if you get an 89 to 75, you would get a silver. 75 to 60 would be a bronze, and 60 and lower would be a seal of disapproval, or otherwise an F score in my category. Now, you guys may be a little bit doubtful right now if this score actually really does work, and I can actually confirm it. I actually tested on a whole bunch of other Dreamcast games, and I can tell you for a fact this score really works very well. It matches with how I feel about each one of these games. And I really mean it when I'm saying that I'm going to be grading these games very critically, because if I were to go back and do my Wind and Water Puzzle Battles review, I would actually not award it the Golden Seal of Approval. I would actually award it now with a Silver Seal. So yeah, I hope you guys can understand how much more critical I am right now, and I'm going to take that same level of criticalness and apply it to this Soul Calibur review. Let's see how well does Soul Calibur hold up to my level of analysis. So the story category, in order for a game to be awarded a full 20 out of 20, your level of writing for a game has to be seriously awesome. Like, I'm talking about like The Last of Us kind of awesome. And also, the story has to be told in a very interesting way, with like a lot of cutscenes and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, because of that, Soul Calibur is not going to be doing very well in this category, and I got a couple of good reasons. So, the story of this game basically centers around all of these characters. They're basically fighting against each other to get the Soul Edge, the ultimate sword of this game. Whether it be for honorable or entirely selfish reasons, it really depends on what character do you play as in the arcade mode. And that's one thing I really like about this game, is that you're able to play as either the good character or the bad character, depending on what character did you select in the character select menu. The problem is that this game's story is told in a very okay-ish kind of way. So the two methods that you can obtain the story in this game is you can either read in the instruction manual, where it gives you a good backdrop of the characters and what their motivations are, Or if you beat the arcade mode, the game will give you like these cutscenes of basically they're just drawings with text that appear that explains what does the character do once they got the soul edge and all that stuff. And to be honest, this way doesn't really give you like an emotional connection with the character. It's just such an average way of storytelling. But I'll give the game this, and that is I absolutely liked the way that this game, as I mentioned before, you can play as the evil and good character, because you can either get a bad ending or a good ending, depending on who you choose. Another thing that I absolutely liked in this game is that some of the characters, their stories intertwine with each other. Like, you would have this character, and then there's other characters that you can play as that are interacting with that character you're playing as in that story. And I personally really like that type of interweaving stories. It's pretty cool. But unfortunately, these good points unfortunately are not enough to counteract the mediocre way of how the story of this game is told. Heck, here's the funny part, even the Wikipedia page of this game actually tells a better story than the actual game. So yeah, unfortunately, yes, there are some good attempts to make a good story, I can see that, but unfortunately, it's not enough, so I'm going to have to give Soul Calibur a 13 out of 20 in the story section. But please stick around guys, because I'm going to tell you guys right now, Soul Calibur is going to do freaking excellent in the other sections. So let's start off with the gameplay section. Now, anybody who's ever played this game before would know that Soul Calibur is going to do extremely well in this section. This game is renowned for such an amazing gameplay. This game is really good. So what Soul Calibur is basically an arena fighting game where basically it's basically like your typical fighting game where you got two players and you basically combat each other into whoever dies first, and then if you basically manage to kill a player 2 times, then you would move on to the next stage. But if the other way happens where the other player kills you 2 times, well, then basically you lose, and you basically are given the option of retrying again. And this is a great thing about Soul Calibur. You have unlimited continues. So if you're stuck on a pretty hard boss or something like that, don't worry, you can just keep mashing the start button all over again so that you can continue on, which is pretty sweet. But here's the thing that makes this game separate from a fighting game, and that is of course the addition of it being an arena. Now, arenas are basically, I'm sure you guys know what they are, but for people who don't know, basically you're playing in just like this limited area kind of thing where you can actually be tossed out of a certain section. If you get tossed out of the ring, or yeah, I'm gonna call it the ring, if you get tossed out of that, then you basically lose that particular match. So yeah, so you obviously don't want to do that. But most other arena fighting games handle this in it's an okay way, where basically if you step out of the arena, you basically get out of the ring kind of message and you just lose. This game is very special because the arena takes place on platforms, and if you step out of the arena, you will actually see your character fall to their death. It is so funny to do that. But you know what's the genius part of this game? So, the genius part about this game is that if you whack a character, you can literally whack characters off of the arena and you can watch them fall to their death. But the genius part is that you can literally fall in after with them. And guess what? You still won that round, which is so awesome, and I really enjoy that. And I'm going to have to make a confession here, and that is, that action is a guilty pleasure of mine. I always do it every time that the CPU falls off. I always have to jump in after with them. I don't know, it's just something I always do in this game, and it never gets old. So yeah, and I'm sure it never gets old for a lot of people too. But one thing that's awesome about this game is that when you basically defeat a character, if like you didn't toss them out of the ring, one thing I really like about it is that even they're out of health, you can still whack the living heck out of them. It is so funny. I always do it every time. And there are many different ways that you can humiliate your enemy as well. One thing I like to do is I love to press down on the D-pad of this game and then press B which allows you to do the kick move. And I just love kicking them over and over again. It is so funny. And when me and my friends played this game, we also did have our own little taunt in this game, which is basically to press down and press A button on the Dreamcast controller repeatedly, so that you do this really weird thing where you wave your weapons around and stuff. It is so funny that this game does that. And then what's awesome is that you get this really awesome replay after that, which, by the way, the camera is not stagnant. You can basically move it around with the D-pad, and you can zoom in and out using the X and Y button on the Dreamcast controller. And then here's a little trick that probably not many of you guys actually know. If you press the B button, you can switch between the two different characters. And if you basically do this enough times, you're basically able to create these awesome replays and stuff. It is so fun to do that. This game is unrelentless in how much fun it is. It is fun from beginning to the end. And what's great about this is that this game has so many modes that you can play from. So the first mode that I'm going to talk about is the arcade mode, and this is basically exactly how Soul Calibur was in the arcades, where you can basically you select a character and you can fight through 7 different stages, meaning 7 different characters. Once you've done that, there is an 8th stage, and oh boy, you're in trouble, because you're going to go against the main boss of this game, which is Inferno. And he's a pretty interesting boss, because he basically, each time you play against him, he switches weapons, and the weapons that he has are weapons that the other character uses. So you get a very interesting situation where you have to constantly adapt between rounds your fighting style in order to combat the different personalities of characters that he chooses. And it's completely random, so you can never tell. And if you're playing as a particularly bad character, well, you're gonna die a bunch of times against this boss. So yeah, but eventually, but it's not like the hardest thing in the world, because eventually you're able to beat him. And then after all that, you basically get all the cutscenes that I explained earlier in the story section of this review, and you're able to submit your score. And it is such a satisfying feeling when you get to see, when you play this game so many times, you get this whole roster on the arcade thing that basically has your whole name all over it. It's so fun. Now, the developers at Namco were pretty smart in how they handled the replayability of the arcade mode in this game, because every time that you beat the game with a single character, you unlock new things like new characters and new maps and all that stuff, which is pretty cool. And speaking of that, this game has a huge roster of amazing characters to play from, and they all are amazing to play. Personally though, I think some people might disagree with this, but there is only really one character that I don't like playing as, and that is Taki, because she's like a ninja and she jumps around like all over the place. Like if you're if you're a button masher like me, yeah, she tends to jump all over the place, which is kind of annoying. But yeah, but all the other characters are very fun to control as well. And one more thing that I'd like to say before I move on to explain what the other modes of the game are, is that I would like to talk about the controls of Soul Calibur. Now, this game controls extremely well. It's very responsive. It's very fun to do that as well. So the way Soul Calibur works is that, so I'm going to be explaining it in terms of the Dreamcast controller. Now, don't worry, because if you have an Xbox controller, the button configurations and everything is identical to the Dreamcast controller. Don't be surprised, because Microsoft did work with Sega and the Dreamcast, because they made Windows CE for it. So anyways, the way that you move the characters in this game is either through the analog stick or the D-pad. Now I'm going to explain in terms of the D-pad because it's my preferred method, and the reason is it's much more precise than if you were to use the analog stick. Now, the way that you move your character is that if you press left on the D-pad, your character will move to the left. If you press right, the character will move to the right. If you press down, your character will turn into a crouch position, and then if you press up, your character will be able to circle around your enemy opponent character, which is pretty good, because it allows you to dodge attacks, and it gives you a good advantage over the enemy. But there are additional things that you can do in terms of character movement. If you double tap the D-pad in the direction of your opponent, then you will be able to charge at the enemy. If you double tap the D-pad downwards, then your character will be able to circle around the character in the opposite direction. So it's pretty cool that you can do that. So that's basically it in terms of how do you move your character around Soul Calibur. So now I'm going to talk about the buttons. So Soul Calibur is a very offensively played game because you can kind of tell already in the button configurations. You have 3 separate buttons out of the 4 that are designated for attack moves. So what I mean is that the X button is designated for horizontal attacks, the Y button is designated for vertical attacks, and the B button is reserved for the kick attacks. And then, the A button, which is the defensive one, it's basically, it's just basically if you hold it down, you can do like this defensive stance, which can be pretty useful for sometimes, but I personally don't use it that often. And speaking of controls, here's a little side note that I would like to say as well, and that is you can actually control this game with the Sega Dreamcast fishing controller. Yes, and I actually made a whole entire video about that. So if you guys would like to check out that video, I'll put the link to that in the description below. Now here's the special thing about this game, and that is this button configuration actually makes Soul Calibur one of the best games for both button mashers and hardcore fighting game players. The reason is because, yes, if you mash all the attack buttons in a certain way and then roll your thumbs on the D-pad, you can create these really awesome combos, and it makes you look really good even though you are a player that's probably never played Soul Calibur before. This game is really easy to pick up and play, but here is the thing. If you're going to play against a Soul Calibur master, they will school you so bad. Because basically, and there's actually a really cool mode in this game that teaches you all the expert modes, or basically the cool tricks that you can do to up your game, and that is the mission battle mode. The mission battle mode is essentially a mode in the game where the game will tell you specific instructions of how to attack the other character in a very certain way. If you do it correctly, you will get points for it. If you don't, well, you lose and you get the option to try it again. But the point I want to make is that if this game is really easy to pick up and play, like a good game, but it takes time to master, and that is the genius of this game. I've seen so many fighting games where basically button mashers, they could just literally decimate all the hardcore players because it's kind of unbalanced in that aspect. But this game is very balanced very well because it does teach you things tricks that you cannot just simply get by simply button mashing. So it is very awesome, and I really like this game in this aspect. So now that I'm done talking about all the controls, I'm going to now talk about the other modes, and I already mentioned one earlier, the mission battle mode. Now, as I mentioned earlier, yes, it's a mode where you can basically learn all these expert moves, but one thing I didn't elaborate on earlier was points. What are these points for? These points can be used in another mode of this game, the museum, which you can use these points to buy artworks of the game, and it is very cool to see it. You can see like all of them in their like crispiness detail, and you can even zoom in and out with the X and Y button on the Dreamcast controller to see more of the detail. It's very awesome. The other modes in this game include a versus mode. So yes, as it sounds, you can play against another player, and I am telling you, this is a really fun game to play against other players, so it is a blast. Unfortunately, I could not get another person to play with me on the versus mode at this time, but trust me, it is very fun. The other mode that you can do is time attack, which I don't know what's the difference between this and the arcade mode. Both of them keep track of your time. And yeah, and you can see even in the leaderboards, they just both keep track of time, so I really don't know what's the point of time attack. But it is a mode that you can do in this game. The next mode that I'm going to be talking about is the survival mode, which is exactly as it sounds. You try to survive as long as you can without losing a life, and that is the key modification of this this game versus the arcade mode. That is, you only have one victory to basically move on to the next round, but so does the other player. So if he kills you once, you're dead, and you have to restart the survival mode all over again. But if you do, manage to kill him, then you move on, and you just try to survive as long as you can. And this mode is personally my favorite mode in this game, because I do find the arcade mode kind of short, because when you are pretty experienced with this game, you can basically chew through the arcade mode in just like a couple minutes. But of course, if you hang around the survival mode, you just basically spend a lot more time trying to survive for the longest, and it's pretty fun to do that. So the last mode that this game has to offer is the practice mode, and it is exactly as it sounds. It allows you to practice like all these combos and all that kind of stuff, but this game does give you like a lot of things, a lot of options to basically tweak how do you want your practice mode to be, and it's pretty cool. Sorry guys, it went a little bit too long on the gameplay section of this review, but that's how good the gameplay of the Soul Calibur is. It's an arcade game, and usually arcade ports really don't put a lot of content into their home console versions, but this is not the case with Soul Calibur. The people at Namco put in a lot of things into this game to really amp up the replayability of Soul Calibur. If there was a way that I could give Soul Calibur higher than 20 points in the gameplay section, I would gladly do it, but unfortunately that's not how my rubric works. But nonetheless, Soul Calibur is going to get a full 20 points on the gameplay section. Alright, so let's talk about this game's graphics. Now, the way that I'm going to grade graphics in my reviews is that obviously I'm not going to compare, like graphics of this game with something of nowadays. A great example would be comparing this game to Soul Calibur VI. That's ridiculous. Obviously I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to be doing with the graphics section is that I'm going to be comparing it with its contemporaries. So, and I can personally do this because, yes, the Sega Dreamcast was the first console I ever owned, but basically I forgot about it. And I actually was raised up on the PlayStation 2 and the Nintendo GameCube. And so I have a pretty good idea of how does the games of the 6th generation look. And I'm here to tell you that the Sega Dreamcast was no slouch in its graphics department. It looked very similar to all the games that I played on the PlayStation 2 and the GameCube. It was very comparable, and this game is a prime example of that. And another interesting thing I would like to say about this game is that this game is symbolic. Because, so the Sega Dreamcast was very well known for finally, when home consoles were able to bring graphically arcade perfect ports home, and it started with this game, and this game actually did it even better. This game had better graphics than the arcade version of this game, which is crazy considering that the developers that worked on this home console port was less than the ones that developed the original arcade version, and only did it in 7 months. That's crazy. So I'm sure that you guys can tell by now that I absolutely love the graphics of this game. The character models are very detailed, they have very good textures on them. The backgrounds, they're fully rendered in 3D models. There are no textures in the back. There are textures in the background, but they don't make up the majority of it. There are 3D backgrounds, which is one of the improvements that this game had over its arcade counterparts. The way that the clothing moves, and that's one thing I want to talk about. The animation of this game is fantastic as well. The characters move with such amazing fluidity. It is so beautiful to look at this game. And I really do like the fact that, they really put a lot of special effects. For example, the weapons have like this glowing trail that, follows, the weapon when the characters swing them. And I really like all the little, like, when the weapons clash, there's all these sparks that come out. This game is incredibly detailed and it's so beautiful to look at. And all of this is done at an amazing stable frame rate of 60 frames per second. Yes, there are moments where this game does dip, but it's only for like a millisecond, and it's over like very certain conditions. This game is very stable in its frame rate, and it's amazing that Namco was able to do this. So of course, with all this amazing graphics, there is no way that I'm not going to give Soul Calibur a 20 out of 20 in the graphics department. So the next thing that I'm going to talk about is the art and presentation. Now, some of you guys may be thinking that, wait, isn't this kind of similar to the graphics department? And I'm here to say it's not really, because what I'm more trying to do in this section is that I'm trying to compare, so how does the menu look? How does the fonts look? How does the character art and all the design of everything? Is everything easy to navigate? Like, things like that. That's more or less what I'm going to be talking about in this section. So, Soul Calibur, I'm going to say it right away, has very good character designs. So I mentioned earlier in this review that all the characters in this game are pretty cool, but not only are these characters fun to play as, they're also extremely pretty to look at. All these characters have their own unique character designs that make them stand out from each other, and you know what's the crazy part? When you go to the character select menu, if you press the B button, you can actually select another costume for your character. Yeah, so technically, Every character that you see here has 2 costume designs at least. That's crazy. And all these costume designs, by the way, are all unique in their own distinctive way. And it is a very good job that Namco did with the character art designs. I really like the menu system of this game. Now, I know it's pretty basic, but this is definitely an area where I would want the menu system to be pretty basic because it makes everything very easy to navigate and all that stuff. Of course, the logo of this game looks excellent, all the fonts look good, and so on and so forth. And I mentioned it earlier in this review, but yeah, the cutscenes that you get when you beat the game, they have these amazing drawings. It's very, very nice drawings that they did here. It's very expressive, and it looks very nice too, and it really coincides with the art style of this game. So because of all these reasons, I'm going to give Soul Calibur a full 20 out of 20 in presentation. So the last thing that I'm going to talk about in this review is music and sound design. Ooh boy, who can ever forget the announcer of this game? He has so many classical quotes. I'm going to play them right here for you.
Welcome back to the stage of history. Battle 1, fight! This victory strengthened the soul of Siegfried. Lizard Man was seriously wounded, but the soul still burns.
Yeah, so once you ever heard of this announcer from this game, you just never forget it. And one thing that I liked about this game is that I liked how they decided to keep the original Japanese voice actors for the localization of this game here in North America, because they sound very good already. They're energetic, they're expressive, and they sound like people actually fighting and taunting each other. It's very good. I'm very glad Namco did not hire English actors, actors that just didn't even try, like unfortunately for the case of something like House of the Dead 2. No, Namco decided to keep the original dialogues of the Japanese voice actors, and I'm so glad that they decided to do that. Another thing that's great is that I really like the music of this game. The music is very fun, and it really does fit the action of Soul Calibur. Unfortunately, I'm not going to give Soul Calibur a full 20 out of 20 in the music and sound design section of my review because, yes, the music is very recognizable. I would recognize it from anywhere, but it's missing the catchiness factor. And what I mean by catchiness factor is that if you can hum this song from outside of the game, then it is catchy. Unfortunately, I tried and I'm not able to do that. I cannot hum a single tune of this game without listening to it from outside of the game. But nonetheless, the music is very good, it does suit the action of the game, and of course this game has amazing sound design. So for that, I'm going to give music and sound design for Soul Calibur an 18 out of 20. So now that we got the last section done, here's the moment of truth. What kind of seal is Soul Calibur going to get? Soul Calibur got 13 on story, 20 on gameplay, 20 on graphics, 20 on presentation, and 18 on sound design. When you add all this up, Soul Calibur gets a 91%, which means that it deserves the golden seal of approval. But it is actually only 2 points above from getting a silver seal of approval. Yes, that's how critical I am. But I think that this new rating system is absolutely fair because it allows me to make all the necessary criticisms that I need to make on this game, but at the same time it still gives it a reasonable kind of score that Soul Calibur absolutely deserves. Soul Calibur is an absolutely amazing game, and it was such a fun and honorable time for me to basically review this game. So anyways, that basically concludes my review of Soul Calibur, the legendary game for the Sega Dreamcast. I really hope you guys enjoyed this review, and what do you guys think of the new rating system? Do you think it's very critical, or do you think it's absolutely fair? Please tell me in the comment section down below if you guys have any suggestions for me to improve my rating score anyway in the future, so that it could be, used better in terms of when I review other games. So anyways, so this is the end of my Soul Calibur review. This is the Sega Dreamcast. My name is Michael, and may the dream be with you.